What a year it's been. From Henrik's warm-up snafu to winning the World Cup title, to the shocking death of Chromatic, to Olympic triumph and defeat for Carl Cook, to McLean's unexpected crash in Calgary, 2024 had no shortage of excitement. We at Horse Bytes have come up with our 2024 Wrapped. Let's take a walk down memory lane.
Henrik von Eckermann, the world #1.
Back in early April, we had our first big moment. Henrik von Eckermann and King Edward were poised to repeat their World Cup victory. They were in the lead coming into the final day, but a crazy fall in the warm-up really shook them up. Their final round was a bit shaky, but they kept it together and retained the title after all. It was a big moment for the world's highest-ranked horse rider pair that would make them favorites heading into the Olympics, but we all know how that turned out. But we'll get to that in a moment. The World Cup Finals, however, wasn't just about Henrik and his repeat win. Unfortunately, the main story of that week was about the death of Jill Humphrey's wonderful partner, Chromatic, who tragically passed away from a confluence of drug interactions after the second qualifier. It was a big deal at the time and eventually led to serious investigations into the veterinary procedures from the U.S. governing body. It was ultimately settled out of court, but sadly, Chromatic's death was a stain on the sport in 2024. Moving on to July, and it was CHIO Aachen time, arguably the biggest event on the summer calendar, and Richie Vogel absolutely dominated, even jumping over a plant to win one of the classes. He podiumed in 10 classes and almost won the Grand Prix too. He had the time in the jump off but put his hand up over the last fence as to celebrate early, and with a small twist of his body, United Touch clipped the back pole and ruined any hopes of a victory. It was a crazy, heartbreaking moment, but also a moment that reminded all riders that it ain't over till you cross the finish line. But Aachen wasn't only Richie's week. Another dicey moment happened when Harry Charles fell off during the week and fractured his wrist. It put his Olympic hopes in question as he walked out of the arena clutching his arm. Imagine if it had been worse and he hadn't been able to compete, he wouldn't be the gold medalist he is now. Make sure to hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell to stay up to date with all the new content. And if you're loving Horse Bytes, share it with your friends and help us create a community around the best our sport has to offer. And then a month later, it was the Paris Olympics, and boy, do we get more than a few insane moments. Sure, Kukuk was individual champion, but Carl Cook's performance was perhaps the most memorable of the week. He came in as alternate, wasn't supposed to compete, which was already controversial as arguably the most deserved U.S. athlete heading into the Games, got subbed in the morning of the team qualifier, jumped the only double clear for the U.S. to help the team win a silver medal, jumped another clear in the individual qualifier, only to falter on the final day in the individual final. It truly was heartbreaking to watch the emotion overtake him as he completed the round, but his overall performance was beyond commendable and memorable.
And why it hurts is because it's hard to avoid that I let her down.
But Paris gave us another notable moment when Martin Fuchs put in the most insane performance of perhaps any equestrian athlete at the Games. After losing his stirrup in multiple Grand Prix earlier in the year, he had a special leather made for when he jumped Leone J.
And I did have already a special made stirrup leather for Leone.
Really?
Yeah, and I kept saying, I feel like one day I'm gonna lose the stirrup in important class.
He lost his stirrup over the early crazy scopy double when Leone double pumped to get out. He almost fell off, got himself back in the saddle, but his stirrup got stuck over the saddle and he jumped the entire 1.65 m Olympic final with one stirrup clear until the final fence. It was devastating, but also the best example of professional horseback riding I've perhaps ever seen.
Even though you're not happy with the result, it was amazing to watch what you did as an athlete, so I think we all commend you for it.
Thank you. I'm glad it looked amazing. It didn't feel amazing.
No, I can imagine. It felt terrible.
The Olympics in Paris, however, saw the most shocking moment of the year when world #1 Henrik von Eckermann and King Edward parted ways in the individual final. They had already had a rough week with a number of unforced errors and nerves keeping them from leading the pack. They may have come in as favorites, but as Henrik was aware himself, they only had an 8% win chance, and this time the odds were not in their favor. After a shaky first half of the course, King Edward unseated Henrik over the oxer towards the gate, shifted on landing, and threw Henrik off balance. King Edward one way while Henrik went the other, and he fell off directly in front of the King of Sweden. did. It was certainly not their crowning moment. The king and his entourage was caught saying, "The crowd caused it. It wasn't his fault. Can he jump again?" Unfortunately, he could not. And I think everyone would have loved the world's most decorated pair to top off their record with an individual Olympic gold, but unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards. A few weeks later, the world's top combinations headed to Calgary for the $3 million Grand Prix. Martin Fuchs and Leone eventually retained their title from the previous year, but the most unexpected moment came from McLean and Ward at jump number 1. They were certainly one of the favorites in the pack, but after Elefs misjudged the spooky wall and left a stride early, they crashed through the fence and McLean popped off, and their long journey was cut short. Not the ending they were hoping for, but it certainly gave us all a shock. And now to the final major of the year in Geneva. The Grand Prix was utter carnage, as we witnessed some of the best in our sport make some insane mistakes. Riders missed distances left, right, and center. Horses unexpectedly ran out at jumps, but we got the most worthy of winners. It took a dozen attempts, but Harry Smulders and the ever-consistent Monaco finally got their first ever meter 60 Grand Prix title, and boy, was it a sweet victory. And lastly, here's some of your favorite riders' picks for their top moments of 2024.
Hi, I'm Jessica Springsteen.
Abdel Said.
It's Nico Philippaerts here. My top moment of this year was Scott Bryce riding the clear round for the Olympic gold medal in Paris this year. I thought it was an unbelievable achievement, and I think that was the moment of the year.
My top moment of 2024 was watching Team USA get the silver medal in Paris.
My 2024 top moment was winning the Grand Prix of Doha.
So what's your top moment of the year? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. We will be back in the new year with more Horse Bytes, your 5 and 10. 5-star show jumping, all in just 10 minutes. Stay tuned for big show jumping in small bites.